little Mark to get us started.
All right, welcome everybody. This is the Digital Roundtable. We're back at it. The crew is here in full force, and we have a great guest. Let me really acknowledge Steve Koenig for us from the Consumer Technology Association. Hello, Steve.
Howdy, great to be with you. Thanks so much for inviting me.
Well, we're delighted that you're here. We're going to talk all kinds of cool things. And we'll when we get to you, we'll talk a little bit about your background and all that. And, you know, could kind of interview you a little bit and get your brain thrust on what's going on. But Llewelyn, how are you doing today?
We're doing fine, thank you. We're doing fine. We're a little stir crazy, but not badly.
All right, all right. And Dr. John Butler, how are we doing down there?
We're doing fine in Austin, Texas. Another day in paradise here. We've just been a little tempted by the virus, but another day in paradise. It's a great day. It's very, very cool and wonderful things are going on.
Awesome. You know when you're in paradise, when the temperature gets so high as it does in Texas, you might think you're in the other place, that you took the wrong turning.
Of course, us Texans look forward to the heat, and if you don't like the heat, please stay out of Texas. We look forward to the heat.
So I'll tell you something, really true story. One of my partners just flew to Richmond, Virginia, and came back, and his wife, you know, I think the temperature that day was 92 degrees, and his wife was going to pick him up at the airport, and she said to him, "Stand up outside, the sun hitting you, and I'll be there in 30 minutes.
Wow.
so that he would be already disinfected. You know, it's one of the conveniences of living in a hot climate.
Right.
And a lot going on since last week. Unfortunately, the toll continues to go up. The total number of cases is now 2.1 million, about 80,000 cases since last week on the way up. And the total of losses, unfortunately, losses to many, is now 116,862, which is roughly 6,000 deaths up. You know, a lot of people may say that those are good numbers. I think that, you know, whatever number it is too many, but, you know, feel sorry for all those that have been impacted. Unemployment, real unemployment, is supposed to be around 23.9%. And you probably remember last week, we talked already about the fact that 2.5 million jobs were added back in May. So things in the right direction. I can tell you that my two oldest children that have been laid off have been hired back for the same companies, which is a good thing. The stock market is slightly down, 500 points from last week on the Dow, 300 points down on New York Exchange Index, and then 20 points down on NASDAQ. Interest rates remain low. The Fed chairman was on the phone today reading Congress, and he basically saying that they're going to stick their guns for as long as it takes to make it happen, which means an incredible boom on real estate. Sales were up from May to April 53%, but you know, year over year still down, obviously, but the trend is moving up. Crude oil prices went up a little bit, $3 since last week. Gasoline at the pump in Austin has gone up 19 cents in 1 week. What's going on with gasoline? So what do you all think is happening with COVID, the recovery? How do you see this coming around? Llewelyn, what in the East Coast?
I think we're still in a very desperate situation. We haven't seen the results in terms of new infections yet from the demonstrations, we are seeing it from the opening up. You know, we are into some kind of second wave. We seem to be less concerned about it than we were in the first wave, but this disease will be with us until we get a cure and a vaccine that will stop it in its tracks. And that will be a huge deployment, not only of the vaccine, but getting people inoculated. So we're going to have another rough year. And I think little indications here and there are very meaningless. I think the true unemployment figure is much higher than the data shows, and that will become apparent. It's very interesting that you should raise the housing market. People are investing in houses because it's the one secure thing. Also, we're not building it. Building has stopped like much other business, so the inventory is not increasing. You are getting some realignment of people wishing to leave cities and live either in the far suburbs or even in the country, and that is reflected in high housing pressure. We haven't yet seen the consequences of the migration out of cities. I don't think it'll be huge, but I think we'll see a fall in the cost of apartments in cities like Boston, New York, and Chicago, and probably Los Angeles, and the West Coast cities. It's a very dangerous, difficult period where the temptation to clutch at straws is huge, but the underlying realities are not attractive. Unemployment is high, business failure is out of sight. We're seeing tremendous failures in retailing, which will be followed by failures in commercial real estate. We're going to have a large unemployed section of the population which will be in need of work. Personally, I hope that Trump is successful with his $1 trillion infrastructure proposal, because that will absorb a lot of workers, even if we have to create shock horror, John, a works project administration to absorb people until a new economy emerges. And that will take 2 or 3 years. A new economy will not appear ready formed out of the gate, as it were, within a few months. It takes time. It's a bitter, difficult, bumpy adjustment. So there's nothing to be joyous about at this point in time.
John Butler, what do you think about all that?
Well, I think it's good. I think we moved from a period of risk where we can actually measure it to a period of uncertainty where we really don't know what's going to happen. And the thing about a period of uncertainty is that there are lots of opportunities in that period of uncertainty for people who would like to step forward and create new business models and do certain kinds of things. It's good to see the unemployment rate will come back. The economy came bouncing back. If you look at the job creation, that's always a good sign. And the data shows that indeed it is bouncing back. The stuff about the housing to me is very, very interesting. As my colleague Llewelyn said, people like to look at the future and place a bet on things that all people will have to have in the future. And of course, housing is one of the things that will always be there, along with water and oil and gas and those kind of things that go up and down. I think that the stock market will continue to bobble up and down as people lose confidence in the economy opening up, or lose confidence in the companies that will be affected by people not getting together. One of the things that we can measure is all of those companies that require people to get together. Starbucks, for example, is not really a coffee place, it's a gathering place. If you look at football games, they're not really football games, they're gathering places for people to go have a lot of fun. If you look at schooling or universities, anybody can learn 2 + 2 anywhere, but people like the interaction to meet friends for the future, lifetime friends. So I think that all of those things are beginning to change. And also, I'm keeping an eye on the new startups around because this is my theme, startups, around new technologies and around all the problems that we have. So I think all in all, we're in a period of uncertainty. And as we know, if you give me all the data and all the statistics, and I can calculate the risk. But given what we're in now, I cannot calculate uncertainty. And when uncertainty is there, then it becomes problematic. But Americans have always grabbed uncertainty and created a new future. So one of the things we have to ask is, will America grab the reins now and perhaps, as Llewelyn said, create a new system that will hold people over as they are working something out of Washington where we can rebuild the roads, we can rebuild the bridges, and take that $1 trillion that the president is going to infuse into the economy as we bring manufacturing back to America in the Western Hemisphere. So I'm feeling bad about the risk, but I'm feeling good about operating in uncertainty, given my entrepreneurial background.
Got it. Steve, what's your take on all this?
Well, I think Llewelyn and John put it really well, and so just a few comments to add in extenuation. Definitely, the unemployment figures are staggering. We haven't seen this since the Great Depression, and one of the things that we're watching is just what happens when the music stops related to stimulus. I mean, I think these past several weeks we've been kind of living in some ways, economically speaking, in a false reality because of the stimulus. Our research, we've measured a real land office business, if you like, for technology in many ways, and a lot of stimulus dollars. The point is that a lot of households, just because of these stimulus dollars, suddenly felt rich, and others are spending in the marketplace. Of course, that's the idea. But once those funds run dry, then what happens? Do we need, and of course, we've all been reading the news and we see this subsequent stimuli coming forward perhaps. And my question is this, what is this doing to the national debt? I mean, it's already just in the stratosphere, and what are the implications for young people and future generations, our kids and so forth? Speaking of the new economy that Llewelyn mentioned, I mean, I agree it's going to take several years to figure all this stuff out, and it will be forever changed. But let me just make one positive comment, if I can just say so. Being from Consumer Technology Association, can I get a round of applause for technology? I mean, can you imagine if we were in 2003 with the SARS crisis and had what we're experiencing today? I mean, we would be all on the telephone. We'd probably have the telephone glued, and that's before smartphones, by the way. So pushing buttons and on the phone all the time. Now we have these digital tools that are enabling us to connect virtually in this way. I think that sticks with us, regardless of when contagion is contained. There's going to be this virtual component. It's allowing our economy to at least find some modicum of footing, and for us to engage in business in other settings. Again, I think that continues. And in education, it's become crucial for allowing teachers to stay in front of their students. And we'll probably hear more as we march closer to that back to school period. But another genre of technology that has been really accelerated by this crisis is telemedicine, something that was with us beforehand, but now has become really an indispensable tool in many ways, and we expect that to continue. I mean, there's so many other trends, but suffice it to say that technology related, when we think about the health crisis, our research has shown that generally speaking, that the crisis is really accelerating a number of pre-existing uptrends, and the innovation that is being forged in the crucible of this crisis is really game-changing. And as it relates to consumer behavior, a lot of these behaviors, like ordering your groceries online and having delivered to your home and so forth, prior to COVID-19, I mean, that was highly, highly discretionary, wasn't it? So now, for many households across America, it's essential. So behaviors that were discretionary before have now suddenly become quasi-essential. We think those behaviors stick post-crisis.
Yeah. The classic point, Steve, as you know, and as VP of Research at Consumer Technology Association, driving both the consumer and business research there, it's good to hear your perspective. As we switch from sort of, what's going on now, what's America responding, and how clearly, we have said from day one in the as we launched Digital-Roundtable because of COVID-19, that COVID-19 was really a great catalyst in accelerating what was going to take 5-10 years of adoption in a very short time frame for us in the coming weeks and months. And clearly, significant number of examples of that. And you know, for those who are in the technology space and love automation and software and connectivity, clearly this is, you know, an amazing time in terms of new business models and opportunities that John always talks about. So let me share some of the things that are happening on the shifting that is going on, and you guys can comment on. So telecom and 5G, which should be something very near and dear to all of you, especially Steve. So interestingly enough, AT&T is shifting. You know, they're a phenomenal company, have all kinds of great future technologies and opportunities in front of them, owning FirstNet and their commercial network, and now pitching private LTE networks for utilities, things, and so on, and 5G coming. But nevertheless, AT&T announced today a layoff, 4,700 people. They're shutting down 250 stores, which means people are not going to the stores. They're going to Amazon, they're going to Best Buy or the AT&T online store, and they're ordering stuff and getting it delivered home, right? I mean, so there's a shift going on. It's an interesting shift, has some losers and some winners, and obviously companies need to adapt, right? So for example, interesting deal that was announced yesterday, Qualcomm is combining their 5G and their artificial intelligence technology and chipsets into a brand new platform called RB5 that focus on high-end robots and drones. So if Qualcomm is doing that, you know that all the vendors that are making robots and drones in the world are calling Qualcomm and saying, I want these features and this functionality and these chips because this is what I'm trying to build. And while we don't see that device shipping next week or for Christmas, clearly the amount of robots, and as I said to you all, we had talked earlier about the drone economy. You know, if Amazon is delivering on a UPS truck or their own trucks things in 24 hours, with the new drone economy, it'll deliver things in 10 minutes, 5 hours, 2 hours, wherever you are, right? So here's another point, and you know, if you can remember all this, we'll come back to them, but Verizon is offering now, for the first time, just announced a 5G personal computer package with Lenovo. It's the first 5G PC available. The monthly plan is $30. I'm not so sure how much data you get from that. I'm assuming that is a significant amount of data. I don't know if it's unlimited, but there you have it. There's GPC available today. Zoom that we're using right now grew in Q1, January, February, March, 50% in sales. CVRS investments, and Steve can maybe jump into that one, is accelerating dramatically in Q1. Every carrier known to mankind, and anybody who wants to play in the 5G game is trying to buy CVRS licenses. And a company like in the UK, there's a new private provider called Quartus, and they're growing, building private networks for enterprises, just announced opening offices in Japan. And so the 5G world, the telecom connectivity world is sort of like off the charts. Steve, what do you think?
Well, yeah, I think we're going to see these 5G networks propagate, and we need to. But why? Well, because 5G, along with artificial intelligence, from our point of view, are really, these are the two key ingredient technologies that will underpin the global economy in this decade, for certain. And our take at CTA is that 5G deployment, we need to get there as fast as we can, because the simple truth is that there's no shortage of other countries like China that are trying to do the exact same thing. And those countries that get there first, or among that first group, will certainly realize some competitive advantages in the global marketplace. And certainly when you think about the backdrop of this crisis and how the crisis has accelerated in so many ways, digital transformation, Industry 4.0, I mean, you can maybe do some of that with 4G LTE, but you can do a lot more with 5G. And so it's just crucial. So I'm very pleased to see some of these estimates. I think on the regulatory front, we're making headway with the FCC. The policy team at CTA here in the Washington area been very active there. So hopefully, yeah, we'll see more good things, because countries like China, I mean, with their command economy, when they want something to happen, it's going to happen. And that's not the case here. But I do think probably the US, China, Japan, South Korea will probably be among that first group crossing the finish line for 5G.
Yeah. Llewelyn?
Steve, I have a question. We talk about 5G as though it is here, but as I understand it, an enormous amount of build-out is going to be needed before we really have 5G. And there are going to be some problems of social equity. We already have a problem getting broadband to rural areas. But the kind of build-outs we'll need to have 5G, the rural areas and even the poorer areas in cities are going to be left out unless there's some other mechanism for driving it into the corners of the earth rather than simply into the high density, high money parts of the country.
Yeah, Llewelyn, actually, what's great about 5G is that, I mean, you're correct. I mean, we've talked a lot about the digital divide, and that's certainly true today. And I think 5G will help, if not remedy that, will ameliorate some of that divide. And here's how. 5G is, again, one of these key ingredient technologies that will overlay the entire economy. So that means every commercial and industrial sector, from entertainment to agriculture, will be part of the 5G story. And at CES 2020, one of our exhibitors was John Deere, of course, the manufacturer of heavy farming equipment. And they brought a sprayer, and I mean, it had an enormous like wingspan, if you like. I mean, but this thing had as many or more sensors on it than the most robust self-driving vehicle, and had really military spec precision in its ability to zap individual weeds in a field instead of the usual way of just dusting or spraying the entire field. That adds cost, that's not good for the environment, and so forth. So I think in that example of farming, this is one way as farms begin to automate. They're part of Industry 4.0 too. We've got a lot of people to feed, and farmers obviously want to be more profitable, just like Samsung and every other big for-profit business. I think this establishes a beachhead for us to extend 5G out to rural communities. But it is true, 5G is very, very different in many, many ways, both qualitative and quantitative, if you like. It's important for listeners to understand that also 5G is the first wireless generation that will be led by the enterprise. And that has everything to do with Industry 4.0. All the generations up until now have really been led by who? The consumer. So we think about mobile broadband and how that has really transformed vis-a-vis our smartphones. Well, actually, what we're seeing now with some of the products that were mentioned, the 5G laptop and 5G plans, and of course, we'll probably see the 5G iPhone this fall. I mean, this is just the beginning. And what we'll see roll out theoretically in the next several years is more of the enterprise applications, and that's what's going to really help our economy grow.
That's interesting, but how are you going to get you have fairly short distances between transmitters, right? Between receiving and dispatching points. So you probably need a lot more poles, and you need to have these devices that fit on walls, light poles, lights all over the place. And that is a very big and expensive build out, and it's going to take a number of years before you can say that 5G has arrived. And I'm not opposing it in any sense at all. I'm just saying that it might be oversold at the moment. And the other thing is the consumer, who is a very big driver in anything, pretty satisfied with LTE. They don't know what it is, but they're getting their movies, we're doing this, LTE is working fine. Is there going to be a demand for it? You know, we've seen this in aviation, where the next generation, the Concorde and then the Airbus 380, was a bridge too far. People want them. You know, the airliner doing 600 miles an hour and just under Mach 1 was good enough. They didn't need 2.3 like the Concorde, although I thought it was a beautiful airplane. So I wonder whether we aren't expecting too much of 5G and whether it may be an expectation too far in that people just really don't need it for most of what they do. And I just wonder about that. And what will this build-out cost, and who will really do it? Will each vendor do it? Therefore, what standardization do we have? You know, which has always been a problem. LTE was, in a sense, a way of standardizing a globally adopted standard with 11, right?
Yeah. Well, there is a global standards body, 3GPP, and they are coming out with like release 16, I think it is. It should be green lighted by this summer. So there are standards, and you are absolutely correct. There's going to be a much greater density of antennas. We'll probably find that in more dense urban areas. But you know, 3G was innovative because it got us online on our mobile devices. We were online, we were on the internet, but we couldn't do much. 4G came along and upped the ante, and suddenly we could stream music, we could stream video. 5G, from a consumer point of view, is going to unlock a lot more potential. We think about AR and the just increased data requirements there. We think about VR, virtual reality, self-driving vehicles. I mean, the data requirements for those to operate.
So will be hugely important for self-driving vehicles. You're not going to get there without it, basically, because you can't move the quantity of data between vehicles that you're going to need and between vehicles and their home base, if you will.
Yes, let me say, if I were a board member at AT&T or Zoom, I think what has happened is that the acceleration has changed the business model. That is, we must always look at the business model itself. So if I'm AT&T and I'm laying off 4,700 people, then I know in the planning stage, I was looking at the data, the trend in the data before the virus came along. And I'm sitting around a board meeting and I'm saying the following. As you can see, we have a slight drop off now of people coming to the stores. So we need to come up with new ideas and probably move all of this stuff online because it will affect the bottom line. If I am Zoom, I'm sitting there saying, you know, 5G is coming, AI is coming, and when you combine AI with 5G and everything that's going to be automated, it's going to be dynamic. So while I see these trends, you always see these trends in business enterprise, but let's just take AT&T. I'm sure that their board was planning for this, but it just accelerated it. Because if you look at the trends that was happening on how people, the consumer, Steve, you know better than me, then the mini trend was there. The mini trend was there. Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden it accelerated. And what they're looking at is the bottom line, and quite frankly, how the bottom line or the return for the shareholders, if you will be much greater. So I think that Zoom, for the most part, was just in the right place also at the right time. And Llewelyn, in terms of your comments, I think that in a lot of ways, consumers are pulled along. Who would imagine that I could talk on a cell phone to my sister in Atlanta with a video on my cell phone? So I think what happened is that it would start out with the digital divide would be there, as would be the automobile divide, it would be there. The housing divide would be there. And for us good-looking guys, the woman divide would be there for all the other guys.
I wouldn't know about that.
So the divide issue is always there. That is, we have always allowed new ideas and technology to be pulled along. So what I see when you sent me the discussions for today, what happened was that I looked at it and I said, my gosh, it's a trend that just started, it just blossoming up. There's no way in the world that people sitting around the table at AT&T cannot visualize or were not prepared for this. And I think it happens so sudden, but the subtlety doesn't take away the strategy portion. When they know 5G is coming. They had to have some idea of what it was going to do to their business model, right? All of these things will happen. And so I see great, interesting numbers, but they would have laid off probably more than that, but not as quickly.
Right. So real quick, I'm going to take a pause here for everybody. I'm going to share my screen, and I'm going to do a quick thank you to our sponsors. But first, I'm going to share about our event, which has gone virtual. So I need to update that. It's a virtual event now. It's over 60 speakers, 16 keynotes, 11 panels, all kinds of industries, network, sensors, data, software, utility, cities, mobility, building infrastructure, energy, water, wastewater, and flight, and smart factories. We got keynotes from all kinds of cool companies, from NASA, from Intel, from City of Austin, from all kind of, I forget all the keynotes now, from Katera, from CPS Energy. It's a phenomenal list of speakers. And so we're excited about it. The dates of their event, again, have changed. And they are August 18th, 19th, and 20th. And then August 25th, 26th, 27th. It's all online. The format is really 3 hours every day, 1.5 hours per segment, focus on the verticals. There is a keynote for every vertical and then a panel of 1 hour for every vertical. And we're looking forward to having you all. This is our CMG annual conference in partnership with Texas State University. And so we're looking forward to you all to having you there. If you follow me on LinkedIn or Twitter, you should have all that info. And then I want to thank the Smart Water Summit and Smart Utility Summits, which are partner conferences that we work with and help them grow their business, focus obviously on water and power utilities, co-ops, munis, and IOUs. And they have their dates online and their information. So thank you again for letting me do that. And as I come back, maybe to add on to what we have been talking about, Industry 4.0, and if I can wrap smart buildings into that, Siemens just acquired a company called Visendo to add AR and VR capabilities to what they're doing. I think training in the industrial sector is going to be humongous. I think a VR and AR both for training on the VR and then going back home and with a VR solution to retrain and replace what you're working on and remember what you're working on. I think that's going to be huge on the industrial side of things. And Honeywell and SAP just partnered to improve building performance. So SAP has a whole set of solutions and cloud platforms and their super fast databases. And Honeywell is plugging with them to basically take all building infrastructure, technology, and data that Honeywell manages that have been doing a long time. And now that's getting bolted into the IT and controls and routers and fiber and 5G and all that. So you'll be able, you can imagine a corporation like AT&T, they own thousands of buildings. If they were doing a deal with Honeywell, SAP, now they could probably, instead of having to manage, building systems, one building at a time, now they can fleets of buildings wherever they are in the world and, fine-tune things on a portfolio basis. I mean, this thing is accelerating like you wouldn't believe. And then last but not least, Software AG and Mahindra are banding together to be a system integrator that helps the buyers of these technologies to deploy all this. So, you can see again, there's a shifting going on very quickly here. COVID has basically slowed down everything. If the whole phase grouping getting together is on ice, but everybody else is jumping on the bandwagon of what 5G and AI is going to do for everything. And we have clear demonstrations of deals being done in the billions of dollars. So Steve, thoughts again on that?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think what it all adds up to is that we're at this inflection point, moving from what we generally described overall technology trends, digital transformation in the last decade as IoT, of course, the Internet of Things. I think today we're confronted with a new IoT, and that is the intelligence of things. Of course, that bears testimony to the role that AI is playing in terms of just not only digital assistants that we're all familiar with, Hey Google as an example, but certainly when we think about commercial and industrial applications for automation, and to your point, I mean, that's really accelerated. Why? Well, obviously economics and just how the business model is changing, but also as we move forward, it's to instill confidence and safety for employees. I mean, think about the factory floor. If you can automate things, you might need fewer employees on the floor at one time, and so forth. So maybe pre-crisis, it was all about efficiency and profitability. I think amid the crisis, we add safety and security on top of that with a lot of these digital transformation efforts. And at retail, I mean, the same thing is true. I mean, we're going to see over the next few years, it's happening now, retail being transformed. My mother-in-law works in the grocery business, and she's described how grocery stores are really just basically deleting some shopping aisles because there's fewer customers coming in on a routine basis, and they need that space as a staging area for all the curbside pickup, all the bins and everything, and then deploying out for deliveries. So yeah, we're going to see, and it's been mentioned before. I mean, commercial real estate, massive change, but so many business models changing in this. Again, the intelligence of things is, I think, what we're looking at technology-wise.
Yeah, Llewelyn?
So, I have to ask the Luddite question. And Ned Ludd and his followers were wrong. Every step of the mechanization of human life has in fact produced more jobs. But suddenly we're looking at a world in which that may not be true. For example, the automobile revolution produced like 1 in 7 jobs because suddenly you needed people to fix them, to paint them, to repair them, to service them, to fuel them. Hence we have a plethora of gas stations across the country, some of which are going to fail because of electric vehicles, not requiring that kind of maintenance. But although computers need attention, we don't have a plethora of little computer shops. It's not like that. And the more we get into the digital world, the fewer hands-on jobs for ordinary people seem to be generated. Now, we don't actually know whether that will be reversed in some way, but looking at it prima facie, it would appear that up to this point in time, we have enhanced work with machines, created more work. But now we're with AI, into a world where we may be subtracting work, where there may be a substantial subtraction of work. Steve said earlier in this broadcast that farms were automating, that we're going to have a cultivator so clever that it will find the individual weed and give it a shot of poison rather than, that's just marvelous, and I couldn't agree more. But employment on farms is down anyway. If you're a former farmer, it's hard to go out there and learn to program computers. It doesn't happen. So you may have a huge rump of smart but unemployable people because they're not part of this, or simply because the new dynamic, the digital dynamic, creates less jobs than anything has to this point in time. Everything we've done from the steam engine forward has created jobs even when it was feared that it wouldn't. Now we're looking at a world where we may, for the first time, have technology subtracting jobs and not replacing them with collateral jobs, which is what has happened.
What do you think, Steve? See, right?
So I kind of half agree because it's
not an argument; it's a question.
No, well, yeah. So we've seen a lot of the industrial revolution of water, then steam power, steam power, then electricity, then computers. And now this fourth iteration is smart technology. And with every single industrial revolution that we've witnessed thus far, of course, there's been manifold disruption but a lot of new business models were created, and this is how the economy grows. So what I think we're seeing right now is it is true that we're seeing a lot of automation, and that's creating some job displacement, but it's also creating new opportunities for reskilling, retraining, and actually higher paying jobs. And very similar to like when the automobile first appeared, I think a lot of people were asking, well, what are we going to do with all these horses, first of all, and then all these stable hands and
you look that old, Steve.
What's that?
You don't look that old.
Let me just say this. Spoken, Steve, like a true Texan rather than somebody who lives in Washington, D.C. I'm proud of you. I'm proud of you. Let's see what's going on here. I see this as a natural extension when you look at smart buildings and smart cities as the dimming effect of quality. Because remember, we can have all the smartness that we want to, and the question is, what does this mean for business enterprise? So, you know, Deming was about, he went to Japan, he was about deviations. All of the ports, there was no deviation. So they became smart ports. That is, every generator looked like every other generator. So, you know, when I put my ports on my 55 Chevrolet in high school, I would go to Western Auto and I would get a port and it wouldn't work. I have to go and get another one to make sure it would work because there was no standardization. So Llewelyn, you have to envision with me this. I think that it's going to produce, whether it's smart cities, it's going to be smart everything. It's going to be tons and tons of data. And of course, it will now make the data scientist king. Just as sure as the semi-discipline of economics made the economist king, smart cities and smart buildings will make the data scientist king. It will make those people who are statisticians, who majored in statistics and psychology and statistics and sociology, to create models so the data can be used to make things more efficient. Otherwise, it would be data in and data out, and who cares? So I think what's happening, just like Deming had the whole idea of making parts or products more efficient, we can make people more efficient. We can make red lights more efficient. We can make buildings more efficient. So we have the data to say, well, you know, the entire building was shut down on this side when the sun goes off, and it would kick in and you would have another kind of energy coming in. Or you might say that at this intersection, the red light will produce data so we can know exactly the number of cars, where they're going, what kind of food do they want. Now, for this to be efficient for business enterprises, because remember, if I'm on a board in a business enterprise, it's just a lot of data for me. What I have to do is be smart enough to turn this data so that my unit, my city, not my product. So think of it as looking at a city itself as a product that's producing a lot of data, just like we can look at traditionally automobiles and machines that produce a lot of data, and we can say, how can we improve them? So all of a sudden we have the ability to write the equations, to see what's wrong with the city, see where everybody should go, see where the grocery should go. And my big deal is, I don't know why we have things going bad in grocery stores. I want to make, are you ready for this, Llewelyn? Screw your wig on tight. I want to create the analog of the financial markets for the supermarket. So when you walk into our HEB, the price of tomatoes and bananas are changing based on how good they are. So what I'm saying is, we have the ability, and the data scientists, new jobs will come from data scientists, it will come from people who look at and examine and make sure all of these things work. So as we move forward, new jobs will be created, but all of a sudden, we've got the ability to look at deviations in cities. We got the ability to say, we want every city to look like wherever, Austin, Texas. We want every, and so it becomes more efficient.
And I think, and I wholeheartedly agree with the fact that this revolution is probably going to add way more jobs than we think it is. Think about the current issue with delivery. Talk about a low-skilled job, right? right now, if you're a delivery kid, 20 years old, 18 years old, anywhere, you can actually make money on a bicycle delivering whatever to anybody, right?
Drones come in. When you get drones, the person operating the board directing the drones is not going to be a low-skilled kid, because you've got these things flying around. It's going to be hugely high-skilled with a lot of data available, etc. You move up. The thing about efficiency, I actually met Drucker and had spent a nice evening drinking with him in San Francisco many years ago. And Deming I didn't meet, but I would like to have met Deming. But the goal of efficiency is not a normal human aspiration. It is not part of the human makeup to be efficient. In fact, most of the pleasures in our lives are derived from things that are inefficient. If we go out to dinner, we want a lot of service, we want to pay more to get certain things. Nothing, no efficiency of it. Most of our lives, we try to be efficient to make enough money to do inefficient things like going on vacation. So it is not part of the human aspiration to be efficient, and it's not always beneficial for human beings to be efficient.
It's always beneficial for business enterprises to be efficient. Business enterprises must be efficient.
Smart cities and all of these wondrous things that are coming down the pike, all the correspondence I get is, what about walkability? What about privacy? I don't get anything about how happy I'm going to be when the traffic lights change faster, when Ubers come without drivers and swish me to wherever I'm going. It is not part of what makes people happy. Income, security, and a certain quality of life that is antithetical to efficiency. Now, I think we need to be efficient, but I don't think we need to be carried away on the great God efficiency, because he doesn't make people terribly happy or do them much good.
I think those are...
Llewelyn, what we say is this in Texas is if we're efficient and you make a lot of money, you're still unhappy, you're shopping in the wrong place.
So let me tie one last topic, because we need to hear a bunch of things.
I think there's a mental health problem in Texas.
So I would say, Llewelyn, I would say that you have a point that adoption, people's customer adoptions, enterprise adoptions of all these things are critical, right? But it is also fair to say that even you could not live without this device anymore. Yes, I don't think this device. And I'll let Steve jump in a moment on that. But hold on. 2 points that make your point. So Siemens just won a deal for smart city lights in Miami, because the driving in Miami is getting to be impossible, and they're figured out how to leverage the technology to make all the lights green one way, all the lights, change things, right? I mean, traffic, congestion. So anyway, at the same time that that's happening, right, there's a big project that got a lot of highlights in Toronto. You're familiar with that project in Toronto with a company called Sidewalk Labs.
Yeah,
it was acquired by Google.
It's failed. It's full. Sidewalk Lab, which was Google, has halt because of privacy.
Let me make your point. Hold on. So the question is, when are people going to be ready into an environment where AI and connectivity and sensors are tracking everything we do for the sake of living better, sleeping more, eating more? So this is why, and I'm gonna give the floor now to Steve. This is why I go to CES every year. And I am a technologist. I teach at the university. I'm an engineer. I worked at Microsoft, Philips, many companies, work for Bill Gates. But I go to CES every year. I need to see not only what's being built and made, which is always cool, but what are people talking? What are people saying about these gadgets? And then they always have this amazing pavilion of the winners in each category that I go to like religiously, and I go through every aisle. Why are these products winning, right? So Steve, can you comment on how you keep the pulse on what's happening? And a lot of these technologies are shrink wrap, they're days. How does this magic happen? How
Well, yeah. Well, CES is certainly unique in many ways, and we see a lot of gadgets there. I think generally the show has shed the mantle of a gadget show only. There's so much more. Certainly, as more and more systems are software defined. Obviously, we see a lot of sensorization happening too. But if I could just kind of go back, I mean, when we're talking about smart cities, everything from smart cities right on through to Amazon's digital assistant, which I won't name because she'll kick off just over there. But in any case, I mean, you kind of think about these bookends. I mean, what we're seeing is that consumers endorse these technologies. Now, why do I say that? It's simply because they introduce a lot of convenience and in some ways, Llewelyn, efficiency, helping them be a bit more efficient. And let's face it, I mean, you held up the smartphone. I mean, that's been a godsend in so many ways, and I think it is true that many of us would be at a real loss to just function.
Especially divorce lawyers.
Right. Yeah, and forget about it, just communicating, but to really function without that device. So consumers endorse this. Our research has been tracking ramping penetration rates among U.S. households for a variety of technologies that you might consider emerging in many areas. And we need this stuff because let's face it, we don't really generally have more time on our hands each day. We just have more and more information. A lot of discussion about data. Data is certainly the common denominator, and that's only going to grow exponentially as we move forward in time. And things like smart cities, which is what I always describe. People ask me, what's the next big thing in technology? I say, well, literally and figuratively, smart cities. And we need this because, you know, the UN, they project that by 2050, 2/3 of the world's population will live in cities. And we'll probably have a global population around 10 billion. I mean, we need these technology solutions because what we have today, that's not going to cut the mustard for 10 billion people or more that are living in very dense urban areas. We need stoplights that can monitor us and things pushed to us because we just don't have any more time to deal with it. But I think the key, because privacy was also mentioned, and I think the key to all this is opting in. Opting in when consumers have a choice. I mean, I think generally speaking, if they're able to get something back that's of value to them, they're more willing to share bits of information about themselves, like their location as one example. And that's another thing, just in conclusion, that the health crisis is, I think, starting to change. When we think about health and safety and so forth, people are, I think, a little bit more willing to be transparent about things. I know contact tracing hasn't seen a lot of success here in the US yet. I think the jury's still out on that. We may see that. But yeah, there's a lot of promise with these technologies as we move forward.
Llewelyn?
I just wanted to say that I'm not hostile to technology. I founded new technology. I spent a whole career pursuing and writing about technology. I simply think that it has to have an idea of where it fits, where its mission fits. Now, the immediate, to me, mission for technology ought to be to do something about the environment, to cut pollution. That is absolutely critical if the world is going to support 10 million people. If it's going to support the 7 billion who are already here, we're going to have to do something about the environment, and technology is the only way we'll do it. Without technology, we cannot do it. We have to perfect the circular economy, total recycling of almost everything. We have to be able to generate electricity with zero carbon, and we have to turn over the transportation fleet in the same way, all of which is doable only with technology. So I'm not opposed to technology, but aspects of it which are very hard to accommodate in human life. For example, Andre mentioned Sidewalk Lab in Toronto. I've been keenly interested in this project. And I thought of all the companies that could pull it off, Google would be the one. No, they ignored all the claims about privacy, and in the end it failed. And they withdrew because they failed to address the privacy issue.
Right.
Because technology and because of artificial intelligence, it ought to be possible to direct artificial intelligence to solve the privacy issue so that we feel so totally and absolutely naked all the time. And that is where technology has to have, human goals. The environment is a human goal. Establishing and securing privacy is a human goal and well worthwhile one. Maybe limiting facial recognition. I'm not sure. I think if the police have facial recognition, you'll catch a lot of bad people. We need to address some of this stuff. We need to decide what its real mission is and what its fit is. What is the fit of a technology in a society? Simply because you have a technology does not mean that you should allow it to be imperial and dictate how people must fit to it. It should be fit to people. That's all my point is.
Yeah, let me say this, Steve, also, so that we know in terms of the population shift.
That's a good point, by the way.
Yeah, in terms of the population shift, we've discussed there is a movement of wealthy people to smaller cities. So Texas Monthly ran about 2 months ago, they ran a great series on wealth moving to smaller cities. And also here in this state, we are creating the smart train, the fast trains between cities. So can you imagine a great fast train going in the hill country from Fredericksburg to Austin to Schulenburg? And as people with wealth, as they always done, wealth has always moved away from the cities. So while there is a trend overall of becoming urban in the world, there's another trend where wealth is leaving the city and recreating the dynamics of small cities. And we have lots of small cities. So I think that to Llewelyn's point, the question is, what would this do to the wealth divide and the digital divide? It's like New York City. I mean, I wonder, given all, there are a lot of people who have houses in Connecticut and upstate New York and et cetera, what would be the overall trend given 5G? Because that allows me to live anywhere. So therefore, the idea that is everyone would be living in the city, there are some counter trends that's sort of happening away from that.
And I think that this is why distributed generation, electric vehicles, energy storage, solar panels, coupled with 5G, drives a new paradigm that we're not even thinking about, where anybody can take their solar panels, their 5G phone, and establish a brand new city anywhere, day one. Absolutely. And so the capabilities and the trends that we have talked about that we track, digitalization, decentralization, which it's all about edge, computing on the edge of the grid, everything, distributed generation at the edge of the grid. 5G is all about that, the same, right? And then decarbonization, right? Those three trends. Those are highly enabled by 5G and the energy revolution that we're witnessing.
I would point out that fast trains have an interesting effect and not always the one for which they were designed. Fast trains basically turned Britain into a city-state called London, because you get from very far away into the city and everybody comes to work in London. They don't go to work in the Midlands, for example. Likewise, almost every country that has fast trains, the capital city or the central business area has boomed. Paris, the French countryside is, in a sense, denuded of brains because fast trains drag people into Paris every day. So that fast trains don't always work. And as for new cities, we've been trying to build new cities since the 1930s. There are various attempts. They tend, after a while, to become suburbs of other cities, they tend to lose their identification, the idealism that established them, because there are other dynamics at work. City planners have thought, isn't it wonderful if people can walk to work? Around Washington, you have Reston, which was designed on that basis. I lived there once. It didn't work. Everybody went to work in Washington. Other people came out of Washington to work in Reston. It didn't work the way it was planned, and people tend to not mind something of a commute, so that there's perversity at work in all of these great schemes for the future, and we're not sure what it's going to be.
Yeah.
Lots of unintended consequences.
Yeah. Parting thoughts, Steve.
Yeah, well, let me just say first how much I've enjoyed the discussion. Really, really great perspective all around. So virtual high fives. But yeah, I think it's going to be a bright future. Technology is certainly going to be leading that, and is going to unlock a lot of new opportunities for business, but also for improving lives, medicine, and so forth. So a very, very bright future indeed.
Well, so last year I hosted a panel at CES, and I'm being asked again to come back and speak. So I'm looking forward to that. And we'll see you again in January of next year, if not sooner. John, any parting thoughts?
The story is told about the person in Austin, Texas, who ran into the building and said, "My God, an airplane just landed without propellers." Of course, that airplane was a jet. So I think we're going to look forward to how technology changes how we live. As Llewelyn would say, there are some unexpected consequences around, but we're going to have to measure the consequences with the reality of how technology pulls us through the centuries. We saw it with the telegraph. We saw it with the telephone. We certainly saw it with the automobile. We saw it with the airplane. We saw it with the computer. We saw it with the typewriter. And so I think that for the living and the unborn will look back and say, "Oh my gosh, how did those people live with those obsolete cell phones?" It's always been like that.
I think it was quite nice having an obsolete cell phone, because you could go out for 3 hours and your secretary would take a note which said, "While you were drunk, so-and-so called." Now there's no hiding place. It's interesting what happens. We try to get efficient to make money so we have time to go sailing.
Sure. Absolutely. Hey, John, take us away. We're out of time. Gentlemen, thank you very much. Steve,
let's go to Lincoln, Texas, and the boys. This technology life we're living got us feeling like the Hatfields and McCoys. Between Jerry Jeff's rain song, Newberry's rain song, and Blue Eyes crying in the rain. Back in Lukenbach, Texas, ain't nobody feeling no pain. Let's go to Lukenbach, Texas, Llewelyn and the boys. All this technology stuff got us feeling like the Hatfields and the McCoys. Between Llewelyn's history songs and my songs, Blue Eyes crying in the rain. Back in Lukenbach, Texas, ain't nobody got no cell phones.
Awesome, John.